Hello, today I'd like to read a chapter from Eyre. Chapter 10. A Shriek in the Night. "Here he is," said Mr. Fairfax. She stood at the schoolroom window, dressed in her best satin gown. Adele flew to her side. I followed, taking care to stand on one side so that I could see without being seen. 4 horses were galloping up the drive, and after them came 2 open carriages. 2 of the horse riders were young, dashing-looking gentlemen. The third was Mr. Rochester, with Pilot bounding before him, and at his side rode a lady in a purple riding habit. Her velvet streamed on the breeze, and through its folds shone rich dark ringlets. "Mr. Ingram!" exclaimed Mrs. Fairfax, and away she hurried to receive the company. Voices were now heard in the hall, gentlemen's deep tones and ladies' silvery accents blending together. The light steps came up the stairs, and there was a tripping through the gallery, and soft, cheerful laughs, and opening and closing doors, and for a time a hush. "The ladies are changing their dresses," said Adele. "Do you think Mr. Rochester will send for us after dinner?" "No, indeed, I don't. Mr. Rochester has something else to think about. Perhaps you'll see him tomorrow. Now I must get your dinner." We saw nothing of Mr. Rochester or his guests that night. The next day was fine and warm, and the whole party rode out in the morning, some on horseback, some in the carriages. Mr. Rochester and Miss Ingram rode a little apart from the rest. When they have gone, Mr. Fairfax brought me a message. Mr. Rochester would like Miss Eyre to bring Adele down to the drawing-room after dinner. When the time came, I put on my best dress, the silver grey one, bought from Miss Temple's wedding and other worn since, along with my pearl brooch. We went downstairs. There were 8 ladies in the drawing-room, all very fine and tall. I curtsied to them. 1 or 2 bent their heads in return, the others only stared at me. Blanche Ingram was straight and tall, and beautiful in majestic way. Mr. Rochester was at her side, smiling into her eyes. Adele was introduced to the ladies. I sat alone in a corner. The ladies and gentlemen talked and laughed together, and I was ignored. At last Miss Ingram went to the piano and sang to her own accompaniment. "Now is my time to slip away," I thought, when her song was done. I left my corner and slipped through a side door which was near. A narrow passage led to the hall. In crossing it, I saw that my sandal was loose, and I knelt to tie it on the mat on the foot of the staircase. I heard the dining-room door open. I rose hastily. It was Mr. Rochester. "How are you, Jane?" he asked. "I'm very well, sir." "Why did you not come and speak to me in the room?" "I didn't wish to disturb you." "You have a good deal paler than you were. What's the matter?" "Nothing at all, sir. Come back to the drawing-room." "I'm tired, sir." He looked at me for a minute. "And a little sad," he said. "What's about? Tell me, Jane." Nothing, sir. I'm not sad." "I said that you are. If I had time, I would know what all this means. Well, tonight I excuse you, but I understand that so long as my visitors stay, I expect you in the drawing-room every evening. That is my wish. Now go, and send Sophie for Adele. Good night, my—" He stopped, bit his lip, and left me. I went slowly to bed. Thornfield was a merry and busy house during the next week. During this time Mr. Rochester paid little regard to me. Not that I could unlove him now, because he ceased to notice me, because I saw all this attention given to a great lady who scorned to touch me with the hem of her robe as she passed. She, I was sure, would be his future bride. Then, one wet afternoon, Mr. Rochester was called to Millcote on business. At dusk, a crunching of wheels and splashing tramp of horse hoofs were heard on the wet gravel of the drive. A post-chaise was approaching. The doorbell rang, and voices were heard in the hall. A moment later, the newcomer was shown into the drawing-room. He bowed to Lady Ingram, who was there, as if he thought he the eldest lady present. "It seems that I come at the wrong time, madam," he said, "when my friend Mr. Rochester is from home. But I arrive from a very long journey, and I am sure that he will not mind my waiting until he returns." He was a tall man with dark skin. There was something about him that was not altogether English. It was his voice, I decided, after the dressing bell had broken up the party. When he gathered in the drawing-room that evening, I learned that the newcomer was called Manson, that he had just arrived in England, and that he came from Jamaica, in the West Indies. I knew Mr. Rochester had been a traveller, and I guessed that it was in Jamaica that he had met the newcomer. We were all waiting for Mr. Rochester to return from Millcote, and, as it happened, I met him in the hall when he did so. He greeted me with a smile. "Sir," I said, "a stranger has arrived here since you left. He said that he was an old friend." "The devil he did! Did he give his name?" "His name is Manson, sir, and he comes from the West Indies." Mr. Rochester took my hand and gripped it hard. The smile on his lips froze. "Manson, the West Indies," he said, and repeated the words again, his face turning whiter than ashes. He hardly seemed to know what he was doing. He sat down, and the man sat beside him. He took my hand and looked into my eyes. "Jane," he said, "I wish I were on a quiet island with only you. Fetch me now a glass of wine from the dining-room. They will be at supper there, and tell me if Manson is with them. I am going into the library." Thanks for watching.